All right, so I'm going to hit Control, or on the Mac, it'll be Command semicolon, which will hide those guides. All right. Now, if I select these anchor points, so I simply drew an ellipse, by the way, with the ellipse tool. And if I select this anchor point with the A tool, we can see what a smooth point is comprised of. And if I grab these handles, we'll notice that these handles kind of, notice how, and go ahead and play with this and, make a contorted shape out of your ellipse. We're going to delete this and redraw it in a second anyway. And notice how these handles tend to pull the line around, right? They tend to really just want to, they're almost like magnets, and they kind of pull that curve in different directions. And you can do this in different configurations and create different shapes. But you'll also notice that they always want to sort of create this seesaw around the anchor point. What that does is it forces the line to move rather smoothly through that point. You'll notice it's kind of the opposite of a corner, if you want to think of it that way. It's where the line needs to change direction, but there is no corner. All right, so once you're done kind of playing with that, I want you to go ahead and press the delete key on the keyboard, and you might have to press that more than once to delete those anchor points, and I'm going to press Control semicolon to reveal my guide. So I've created some guides here to help us draw smooth points in order to recreate this ellipse with the pen tool. So what you're going to do is you're going to click the way that you work in the pen tool. And I'm going to hide these guides just to show you guys real quick how this is going to work. Whenever you click a single time with the mouse, that creates a corner point. If you want to create those Bezier handles, what you need to do is you need to click and drag out from that anchor point. And you'll notice that those Bezier handles have been created. Now, be careful not to confuse the Bezier handle with the line it will be influencing, right? Because the line, and it's showing me a preview of what that line will look like as I kind of come over here. And if I click and drag a second time, we'll notice that the path that it's actually created is in the middle. And you have to kind of, I'm just going to deselect my path by hitting the A key, and then reselecting it so that I don't have that preview again, just so we can kind of look at that. You'll notice that these handles aren't literally the line. This interface is not the most intuitive because you have this line kind of coming out from here, and you also have this line coming out from here, and there's not really, other than the fact that it has these little circles at the tip of it, there's not really much indicating that this is a Bezier handle. I'm going to press the delete key a few times. That was just kind of a preview. And then I'll press Control semicolon to kind of bring up my guides. If you need to, just press Control semicolon or Command semicolon until you see these guides. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up the pen tool by pressing the P key. And I'm going to click in the center of this line. And then I'm going to click and drag. So this is one motion. So it is a single click and drag out to these intersecting guides like so. So you should click in the middle of the circle and then drag those handles out in the middle like that. Remember, it is a single click. So each time you make a click, each time you click with the mouse, it will create an anchor point. So if I click here and then I click down here, each of these becomes an anchor point. So what I need to do, I'm going to press Control Z to undo that a few times. So what I need to do is click a single time, drag. In this case, I'm going to drag straight down, and I've got those Bezier handles. And the guides can be a little bit confusing, so just make sure you're clicking in the middle of that circle. And then I'm going to click and drag down here. I'm going to use these intersections, so it should snap to those intersecting guides for you. And this is just this is creating a circle with the training wheels on, right? These guides are here to kind of just help us maneuver through here. And then I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to click and drag out those Bezier handles for each anchor point. Now, one thing to kind of keep in mind is that you want to trace in a single direction. In this case, I want to trace clockwise, right? If I'm going to press Control Z, if I kind of forget which direction I'm tracing and I trace the opposite direction, I'm just going to kind of exaggerate this. You see that the handle that I'm usually kind of creating is opposite to my mouse cursor. Right, so this can get confusing if you start to try to trace in a direction opposite to your direction. So if you want to trace counterclockwise or clockwise, it doesn't matter. Just maintain that direction as you complete the shape or path. And then as I get to the very, very top, you'll notice I will get the close path icon. And I'm going to click that. And what I actually end up having to do is I have to end up redrawing that guide. So notice I'm going to press Ctrl Z just so you can see that one more time. When you close your paths, you end up having to click and drag out from that path, and you will end up having to redraw that path like that. If I press Control semicolon, we can see here, and I'll just hide those guides, we can see here that I've recreated the ellipse from before by following those guides. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is you're going to draw this ellipse without the guides in place. And the one thing that usually gets is a very tricky thing to understand, and this is kind of how to create good shape and form. You'll hear us discussing this in your critiques. Good shape and form is usually created by correct positioning of these Bezier handles, which is not easy. I will be honest. Getting these handles is not, it's going to take a lot of practice. Let me be honest with you. So be patient with yourself as you guys are learning this. Now, one of the tips and tricks I have inside of here that I find very useful is to use the 1/3 rule. So as you're trying to create nice, good shape and form, the 1/3 rule generally helps you guys know where to put these Bezier handles. So you always want a nice smooth curve to be controlled by 2 handles, always with 2 handles. If you try to do it with it is possible to do it with a single handle. It is very clunky and hard to manipulate that curve. So what you want to do is you want to have one handle out about 1/3, controlling that part of the curve. You want about 1/3 of the path open, in a sense. And you want about 1/3 of the path to be controlled by the coming in handle. So you can almost imagine somebody kind of like pitching a ball, and then, you know, about 1/3 of it is the pitch, about 1/3 of it flies, and then about 1/3 of it is the person catching it. All right, and that kind of ends up controlling that path if you want to think of it that way. I'm going to go back to my illustration, and I'm going to delete it. So you can select it and delete it. I already had it selected. And I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm going to click and drag 4 smooth points just as before. And this, I think when you take the training wheels off, when you take those guides away, it becomes much the idea of creating a rough draft path. And honestly, as somebody who's a little bit more experienced with a pen tool, I kind of know where to put these paths. But if you guys are creating paths like this is perfectly okay at the very beginning. So what you want to do is you want to create a rough draft path. And I'm going to try to really hose my path as best as I can, like so. I've got the rough shape of what I want. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with my A tool, and then I'm going to refine my path. And then I'm going to keep that 1/3 rule in mind as I edit my path. So I'm going to just kind of go through my anchor points. You notice that this one was really not out that far. So it was really being very dominated by this other control handle. So avoid this kind of path. Is just very, very hard to control curves like this. So I'm going to bring it out about 1/3 and then bring this one down about 1/3. And then likewise for all my other strings, you can move the literal anchor points if you wish. And out about 1/3, and then just a continual refinement until, oops. Adobe does love to make these things very tiny for some reason. They're very tiny on the screen. And then like so. So you'll want to refine your path until you have the rough shape of an oval. And you're not going to get it. It's not going to be perfect. Unless you just really want to spend a little bit more time. But if you get the idea of creating a rough draft path and you're starting to understand that you can edit these paths and refine them, then you have a good grasp of those lessons. So what am I doing? About 1/3 with this handle, about 1/3, and about 1/3. About 1/3, about 1/3. In fact, this one could come down a little bit. And that usually kind of like evens out. You may notice some irregularities if your path. So if we see here, if we kind of like really break that rule, we can see here that the path does not look quite as refined as it was before. This is a nice, a little bit smoother shape. So you may notice if I really kind of exaggerate this, and here's another thing that you tend to want to avoid is having your Bezier handles crisscross like this. So don't allow them to crisscross like that, or else you'll get kind of very weird shapes like that. All right, so practice that as much as you need, and then you can move on to the next video.